Hello and welcome. With the developments in the Middle East, especially Syria, and Bashar al-Assad now exiting his own country, going to Russia, and what he leaves behind is legacy or not remains debatable. But the whole geopolitical scenario that is evolving in that particular region has become the center of attraction. What started as an Israeli offensive against Hamas, now percolating down to Hezbollah and Iran, found its ricochet effect in the form of the exit of Bashar al-Assad, and how these things are interconnected, how they are shaping the geopolitics of today. To discuss that further, it's my pleasure that Ehsan Safanejad is joining us from Iran. He's an Iranian geopolitical analyst. Ehsan, thank you so much for joining One India once again.
Thanks for inviting me.
Well, Ehsan, we have discussed earlier many a times on different axes and different uh, intensity of war that was happening in the past. Now, with the recent developments in Syria, Iran certainly has been a key ally of Bashar al-Assad throughout the Syrian conflict. Now, how do you see Iran's role with Assad's government gone now? What does it mean for Iranian influence in the region?
Well, it's almost certainly a very important blow that was dealt to Iran and the axis of resistance in general.
Hmm.
But, seeing the government of Dr. Bashar al-Assad collapsing, uh, Syria played a very pivotal role
Hmm.
for the Iranian government to send and arm the resistance groups inside Levant,
Hmm.
more specifically Hezbollah and Hamas groups in Lebanon and Palestine,
Hmm.
respectively. I mean, now that this government has fallen, the
Hmm.
land corridor that was established, and it was playing a very uh, important role
Hmm.
in sort of transferring the logistics side of the military operations against Israel is now gone. That corridor is now vanished, right?
Hmm.
So no one can undermine this loss and the victory that was achieved by Israel. And I do call it an Israeli victory because, I mean, if we talk about the details, it becomes apparent how much of a big role and impact both Israel and the United States had in, these terrorist groups gaining territories and, taking the control of the country. Very famously, Secretary General of Hezbollah once said, if Syria falls, Palestine will fall. So, I mean, this is a very key figure inside
Right.
the axis of resistance, and
Hmm.
he uses this kind of language in order to show the importance of Syria and the way in the way that it was integrated into the axis of resistance and the role that it was playing,
Hmm.
helping the resistance groups inside the region. So surely the fall of the Syrian government is something that, again, no one can undermine, that it was a rather big deal.
Hmm.
However, I think that, not unlike many other things that we have seen in the past 3 or 4 years, and more specifically after the start of the Russian special operation,
Hmm.
now the full-on war between Ukraine and Russia, that people tend to become hectic. They tend to exaggerate.
Hmm.
Let's not forget, Iran was in much worse situations prior to this.
Hmm.
Let's remember that in 2001, United States government invaded Afghanistan, and in
Right.
2003 they invaded Iraq. So in 2003, if you were living inside Iran, the
Hmm.
left neighboring country of Iran and the right neighboring country of Iran were both occupied by United States. And then
Okay.
in 2006, you had the war between Hezbollah and Israel. And back then, I remember very vividly that people were saying, even the analysts,
Mm,
so this was not just like random people on the street saying this, but people were saying that once these countries are done, they
mm,
will surely come for Iran. And you were seeing the dispatching of the U.S. aircraft carriers into Persian Gulf. So you have no place to go from east, no place to go from
mm,
west, and in your southern part, the southern regions, if you go further, you reach the international waters and have to deal with U.S. aircraft carriers. We were in much worse situation before, and
mm,
the situation in 2013 when ISIS was going rampant
mm,
was also very bad. Back then, even Iraq was unstable,
mm,
right?
mm,
Let's not forget. ISIS moved towards Iraq, and it even captured some key cities like Mosul and other major cities. So this is different, not just to prior
mm,
instance in which ISIS and these terrorist groups gained territories in Syria and Iraq, but also it is far from comparable to the
mm.
scenario and the situation that we faced and experienced in 2003, 2004. And we passed those years with relatively, I
Mm.
wouldn't say easily, but relative ease. But we passed those hard days. And
Right.
in the battlefield, you can't always win. You win some fights, you lose some fights. It's important to win the overall conflict, the overall battle.
Right. Ehsan, when we think of Syria, Middle East, Lebanon, Israel all together, the very picture that comes to mind, and for any student of international relations, it's a very complex scenario there, with Iran also being one of the key players standing its ground. United States, Russia, Turkey, all of them are finding some reason or other to be there. We have seen in 2015 also how the issue of the Syrian crisis had spilled a very huge migrant crisis in the Middle East. And now, with Bashar al-Assad gone, what, in your opinion, is going to be the scenario next when all these players are descending, possibly because of oil, possibly because of their own strategic interests? But where does this leave Syrians, first of all? And secondly, what lies ahead for them?
Well, it's very hard to say exactly what will happen.
Hmm.
I mean, as an analyst, you always want to play this very fine line. You don't want to talk for hours and hours without actually predicting something, but at the same time, you don't want to you sort of think of yourself as a fortune teller, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
As it stands, the data, the information is still rather limited for us to reach any concrete conclusion about what is going to happen.
Okay.
But from the key theories, for example, the Union theory, which is
Hmm.
about the balkanization of the countries inside
Hmm.
uh, Middle East, from the role that United States, Israel had
Hmm.
in the conflicts in the region and in supporting these terrorist groups,
Hmm.
and from the sort of playbooks that we have in the politics, there are certain things that almost have become a cliche, and these things are going to happen. For example, uh, Britain sort of made Afghanistan into a buffer zone,
Hmm.
right? When it sort of was facing the Russian Empire, right? So, and this is something very simple. So, what I see in the future of Syria is probably, multiple fractions sort of trying to uh, sort of oppose one another The separatists, more certainly, with I'm mostly referring to the Syrian Democratic Forces, which is made up of Arabs in general. Apologies, not Arabs, the Kurds. There are Arabs in Syrian Democratic Forces as well, but the majority is ethnicity inside that group is the Kurdish ethnicity. With that, and with the existence of groups like HTS, Ahrar al-Sham, let's not forget some of these groups fight against one another prior to this in the previous conflict. I'm referring to 2015, 2016. They fought one another, so they're not really, very fond of each other, right, to say the least. And we had the Israeli invasion of Golan regions. I mean, Golan was already occupied by Israel, but now they are even reaching further into the Syrian territories. If I was a person in charge of furthering the Syrian project inside Mossad, inside CIA, I wouldn't see it as beneficial to create a scenario, create the circumstances under which one group would gain the absolute victory and would sort of establish a central strong government, right? A federal, if a central government is going to be made, it most certainly must be in the format of a federal government, right? That you would see further down the road. You would be able to tweak the smaller states, the federal, local governments, and you would be able to do something with them, to use them in your own interest. So I'm mostly seeing instability inside Syria, but still, it is very early on for talking very decisively what the future of Syria will hold for us.
Right. If I may just add Iran's stand and Iran's stakes in Syria, it all started with October 7, much earlier also. We saw Israel fighting with Hamas, then Hezbollah, assassinations in Iran. Iran pledged that it will hit back. It did fire missiles. But now, do you think that with Israel charging in with the support of United States, Iran's interests and Iran's stakes in Middle East, especially in Syria, face a tough time, face uncertainties now?
Yeah, absolutely. Bashar al-Assad was a very key figure inside Syria. And again, some people try to undermine what happened in Syria. I think that those people are unequivocally, without any doubt, undoubtedly wrong, right? This was a very major loss for the axis of resistance, not just Iran. And, for now, I think that Israel has taken up the initiative in this overall conflict. With Iran, you mentioned, Iran pledging to take revenge on Israel and, other things that come with the baggage of being sort of the main country behind the idea of axis of resistance. Unfortunately, after if you, like me, are pro the idea of resistance, you would feel that, unfortunately, after the election of Mr. Pezeshkian as the new president of Iran, the Iranian losses have become more and more serious and harder to ignore. In the past 3 months, we have seen the complete change in the dynamic of the war between Iran and Israel. Back there during the time of Dr. Raisi, things were more normal. I'm not trying to say that the Palestinians were not being massacred by the genocidal Israeli regime. No, that was happening. And even in that time, people from time to time would criticize Iran and say, okay, Iran should do more. as the country that is the birthplace of resistance in a way. But now it has become completely impossible for any serious analyst to ignore or reject the idea of Pezeshkian not really committing 100% to the idea of resistance. Yeah, and this showed itself in the rhetoric that Mr. Pezeshkian used. Let's not forget, both Mr. Pezeshkian and Mr. Javad Zarif, who is his deputy president for strategic affairs, both of them said that after the assassination of Mr. Ismail Haniyeh, the head of the political bureau of Hamas,
Yes.
the Europeans suggested actually that Iran should not take revenge or retaliate because of the possibility of ceasefire. And both these two gentlemen said that they were deceived, they were fooled, or the fact that the Western countries didn't really commit by what they proposed, right? So when you have that circumstance, when you have a scenario in which Iran says that it is going to halt the 60% enrichment of uranium in our country, and then the Europeans pass an anti-Iranian resolution in IAEA Board of Governors. There are so many countries that vote, but it was mainly a European idea to sort of pass those anti-Iranian resolution. And then the Iranian side sort of retaliates in a very limited way, installing new centrifuges in Iran, but it also expresses interest in still continuing the talks with United States, the European countries, and not just about the Iranian nuclear program, but this time also about, for example, the war in Ukraine, the Iranian regional influence. And then still you hear that 30-something new sanctioned entities inside Iran were sanctioned by United States and the Western countries in general. When you see that kind of reaction, that kind of capitulation, it becomes harder to really compare the administration of Mr. Pezeshkian to the administration of Dr. Raisi. So I think that people should recalibrate their idea of Iranian foreign policy, their idea of Iranian regional influence, and the way that Iran is going to choose its allies and collaborate with them in following certain objectives.
Absolutely, Ehsan. You have put it very elaborately here that what Iran needs within its own rights and within its own territory, and which wars to pick, which cases to pursue, which are outside its jurisdiction, outside its borders. And needless to say, the developments relating to Syria, and now the newfound confidence of Israel and its wish to go the whole 9 yards. How long will it sustain also remains to be seen, and when does it stop? That is the big question. Nonetheless, Ehsan, thank you so much for joining us, and we wish to host you again, time and again, I would say, but in better times to discuss a better future, not just for Iranians, not just for the Middle Eastern residents, but also for the world. Thank you so much.
Again, thank you for inviting me to your show.
Thank you.
Don't miss out. Log on to oneindia.com for more updates.